Don't explore the sewers alone. Written by ImTheCollecter. It all started after I was watching these exploration YouTube videos. The things that they'd search through is truly terrifying. That's why I put myself through the worst experience imaginable, because it looked so easy. There's an old, abandoned sewer in my town about 5 miles from where I live. The city had used it for an old community near a mine, but no one works there anymore. I know what you're thinking. Why did you go to an abandoned mine or an old abandoned town? Well, that's because I am an idiot, and I wanted to do something that no one has ever done before. So I picked a sewer. The ride there wasn't that bad. Actually, things were going really well. I was super excited. I had a backpack filled with snacks, water, flashlights, batteries, a camera, and a gun. I wasn't supposed to take that gun. It was my dad's, but I wanted to feel safe, and I knew how to use it. I arrived at the sewer's entrance around 1 in the afternoon. The part of the sewer that I was entering was like a big half circle in the ground, about as wide as a car. It was like a long tube leading to who knows where. Hopefully, something cool, I thought. The first thing that I noticed about the sewer was the smell. It was awful. It smelled terrible. Like all of the bad things in the world had been put into a blender and flung all over the place. It was so bad that I pulled the strings on my hoodie tight and I tried to cover my nose. As I pressed on into the sewer, I turned on my flashlight and camera. I didn't really know what to do other than make a few comments and walk deeper into the sewer. The sewer was dark and wet and a little cold. It began to get a little skinnier as I went along. It was now about the width of my arm span. As I was walking, I noticed little holes in the walls of the sewer. They were about the size of a quarter or a nickel. When I looked into the holes, I found that they weren't very deep, and they had something shiny in the back, like a copper color. The water in the sewer began to rise the further I went. I knew that this could happen, so I had worn boots, but it was almost above my ankle now. As I was walking, however, I saw something floating in the water. When I picked it up, I realized that it was a clipboard. The clipboard was badly damaged, almost in tatters, but I could make out the words on it. The words like specimen and active. And then towards the bottom I saw obtain samples and capture. I thought that it was cool and I recorded it with my camera. I started talking to my audience, explaining how I thought this could be something important. Eventually, while walking, I heard a loud splash, about 15 feet away from me, deeper into the tunnel. I jumped so hard that I dropped my camera and I instantly knew that I had messed up. I tried searching around in the now shin-high water. I felt relieved when my fingers hit something in the water. I picked it up and then I realized that I was holding a bone with some sort of yellow rubber loosely attached to it. I flung the bone, but as I was backing up, I tripped on something below my feet in the water. I fell backwards into the water and I landed on something hard. It crunched under my weight and then floated up to the surface. Bobbing in the water now was a body in a yellow suit with a mask. I screamed louder than I wanted to and I heard a splash again somewhere down the tunnel. I grabbed my flashlight and looked around and then realized that in my confusion I had gotten lost. I was in some sort of 4-way tunnel in the sewer with a body and something was splashing around. I grabbed in my bag for my dad's gun, an old 1911 from his service days. I knew it by heart. It had only 7 rounds, so I was not going to waste ammo. Shaking, I walked over to the tunnel that I thought I had come through. This tunnel got wider and wider until it was the size of a room. I walked in deeper and realized that there were bodies floating everywhere. There had to be at least 6 of them, all torn open, all wearing the same yellow suit. I began to cry. I moved over to one of the bodies and I saw an American flag and some sort of insignia that I had never seen before. He had an MP5K strapped around his lifeless body. On his forearm was some sort of tactical playbook like what football players use. But this looked like it was more military than NFL. I ripped it off and read the first line. March 7th, 2002. That was 11 years ago, I remember whispering to myself. At that moment, I heard an ear-splitting shriek. I dropped the armband and I turned around. My flashlight shined on a monstrosity. This thing had a face like a lizard and scales. That's all I saw before I was whipped to the side with what I now think was a tail. I flew across the sewer and hit the wall. I still managed to hold onto my dad's gun. I squeezed off 2 rounds in the general direction, but I could hear it running towards me. I flung my book bag into its direction and I ran as fast as I could. As I ran, I stumbled over the bloated bodies and weapons. My flashlight was swinging wildly, revealing flashes of bloodstains on the wall and torn yellow suits. I heard it screech again, and I felt its claws rake my back. I cried out in pain. I could feel hot blood run down to my hand. I whipped around and I pulled the trigger 2 more times. The first round missed, but the second one must have hit it because I heard a terrible scream. It jumped into a hole in the sewer wall and disappeared. I kept running. My flashlight showed endless sewer. Sewer to the left, sewer to the right, sewer in front of me. It all flashed behind me in a blur as I stomped and sprinted my way through the sewer. Splashes of water soaked my backpack and pants with each kick. Once again, I tripped and fell into the sewer water. My boots were filled with water and I began to sink. My mind was racing, trying to figure out where I had just fallen. I had dropped my father's gun, but I had kept a grip on my flashlight tightly. I started swimming towards the surface. As I was swimming, I swear that I saw through the murky water another dead man. The only thing recognizable was the top part of his face. I came to a ledge and I pulled myself up. I started sobbing. I was lost, freezing, and terrified of everything that I had seen. As I was sitting there, I felt my entire body being yanked backwards. It felt like I was being pulled through the smallest crack in the world. My shoulders popped and cracked, and intense pain filled my entire body. White hot seared through my brain as I wriggled and screamed in pain. Either the wall was going to break or I was, and this creature couldn't care less. I whipped my legs over my head like an animal and I kicked as hard as I could. It was as if I was doing a backflip. My left foot impacted with the creature, and it cried out, and I swear I could hear its anger. It let go of me and it ran down the sewer. It sloped downwards and I began to see a dim light. A light at the end of the tunnel. I remember laughing as I thought this. I ran out of the sewer and eventually I found my car. It was around 5 p.m. when I finally found it.
After my interview with this man, he showed me a long claw-like scar on his back. He also showed me his shoulder blades had a faint but noticeable scar on each side. I don't usually believe these types of cases, but he seems to be genuine. He also told me that after 7 years, he will be returning to the tunnel in a few days, and that he will also share his story if he returns. Stay safe as always. The Collector.
He was not there to fight fires. Written by ImTheCollecter. It was late and the middle of summer. My friend and I'll call him Angel, were on our way to some big party that we had heard about. The drive was normal, and we had our windows down, blasting whatever was popular last summer. As we drove down the back roads, I could feel the cool summer breeze hitting my face as we sped along. The air smelled of sweet flowers and greens. As we drove down the road, however, the air around us began to change. It became sticky and hot. It got darker and filled with smoke as we drove. Eventually, the sweet floral smell faded into an ashy, charred smell. Angel and I were confused. "Are you seeing this?" he asked. "Yeah, what's happening?" I said, or something like that. We decided that we'd move further down the road because we were already about a mile in at this point. As we drove, we began to make out an outline in the fog about 100 feet away. What made it stand out was the flames licking at the trees near the road we were headed down. "We need to get out of here, Angel," I yelled. "No kidding," he said sarcastically. "Hey, did you see that?" he said. As he was speaking, I could see shapes moving out in the smoke. At this point, we stopped. "I think those people are on fire." From the road, we were able to see what looked like people walking towards us. They were covered in flames, but showed no sign of stopping. I could feel thick, heavy anxiety spreading across my chest now. "Angel, we should leave, bro. I don't feel like this is a good idea," I said, starting to stammer a bit. As they made their way towards us, I could hear moaning and screaming. Suddenly, they just dropped dead as if all their muscles were finally cooked away. Angel must have gotten spooked because he told me to call 911. Luckily for us, where we live, service is terrible. And guess what happened? That's right, there was no service. Angel began to frantically try to start up the car again, but it was just sputtering and making weird noises. "Start the car!" I screamed at him and begged, but all he could do was stare at me in confusion and stress as he fumbled with the keys. I guessed that we weren't paying attention because as we were panicking, a new shape appeared in front of the car, about 5 feet away. He was carrying a fire axe and what looked to be a really old and messed up firefighter's uniform. Dude, what is that?" I shouted. I was now starting to stutter, something that I hadn't had a problem with for years. Angel was fumbling with his seatbelt when the man took his axe, brought it over his head, and chucked it at Angel. The fire axe burst through the window and wedged itself into Angel's chest with a sickening thud. He gasped for air, as all I could do was stare in horror at the wound. "Leave me," was all that he could get out through the lack of air. I tore off my seatbelt and I had to make a quick decision. Where do I go now? I chose to go back the way that I had come, as I had no idea how far this smoke went. As I ran, I peered behind me and I saw the man shake Angel's body from the blade of his axe, and as he did so, I saw something wet and shiny come out of Angel when it finally gave way. If I weren't running so fast, I would have puked. The smoke was blinding, and my eyes teared up from the burning and from the shock of what I had just witnessed happening to my best friend. I was running so fast that I didn't have time to see the pothole in the road. My ankle twisted and I fell with a bone-jarring thud. I pushed myself up, but when I put weight on my ankle, it felt like my leg was jelly. I fell to the ground again and realized I wasn't going to be able to run anymore. I could hear a deep metallic scraping in the smog about 20 feet behind me. There was a drainage pipe to my left and I quickly dragged myself into the ditch. As I tumbled into the ditch, I heard a whoosh of air right behind where my head had just been. Gravel hit my eye as the axe impacted into the road right above me. I began to frantically crawl towards the drainage pipe in the ditch. I felt his hands grab my leg, and I scrambled for whatever I could reach. I felt my fingers close around a chunk of gravel. I rolled onto my back and I swung the chunk at his gloved fingers as hard as I could. He reeled back in pain and muttered something in his mask angrily. I took this opportunity to fling myself into the hole of the drain. It was wet and gross, with leaves sticking to every part of me. I could feel spider webs and little bugs crawling around me. I had never felt so uncomfortable, but at least the man couldn't get to me. As I thought this, he dove into the ditch and started reaching around for my foot. I tried to kick, but it was too cramped, so I inched my way further and further into the dark, wet hell that I called safe. What he did next was something terrifying. He started to pour gasoline as far as he could into the ditch and the drain, and repeated it on the other side. I began to panic as he lit the flames and smoke began to fill my lungs. I choked on the fumes and the smell of the dead leaves. "This is it," I sobbed to myself. "I'm going to die in a drainage pipe in the middle of nowhere, and no one will ever find me." At that moment, I heard sirens in the distance. Adrenaline pumped once more into my veins as I realized that I might get out of here. I started rolling around in the wet drain frantically, trying to soak myself as much as I could. And then I began to crawl forwards towards the other end of the small, burning tunnel. I was taking a chance because I knew that he was still out there. As I was crawling, I felt sick and tired. I was feeling exhausted and breathing wasn't working. The hole looked like it was getting smaller and smaller, but I kept crawling. I finally made it to the flames and I crawled as fast as I could. Due to fatigue and the lack of oxygen, it was slow, and the flames evaporated the water coating me. I felt hot burning all over my legs as I struggled to crawl out. I was on fire. My legs felt like molten lava. Suddenly, I felt a force pick me up into the air. I began to thrash around and punch as I saw the fireman's mask 2 inches from my face. 2 more hands wrapped a blanket around my legs and I screamed at the touch. I could hear a man saying, calm down," and I finally realized that they were real firefighters.
This is another story that I've collected from another victim of an infamous killer. Again, to keep him safe, I cannot reveal any information on the location or the identity of this male. I hope you have enjoyed this story. The Collector.
A Serial Killer's Happy Eyes, written by ImTheCollecter. I was playing Xbox one night around 11. I was really getting into it, and I guess I just got so zoned in because I never noticed anything outside of my 36-inch screen. I was sucked in, having fun, and getting a little angry, but other than that, it was just like any other night. Eventually, after dying a few times, I took a small break, and I looked around my room. Something felt off. I'm really bad at deciding what's in my head or my gut, but this time, I definitely felt like something was wrong. The house was quiet. Now, every house is quiet at night because everyone is sleeping, but this was a different kind of quiet. I can't really explain it. It was as if everyone had stopped breathing. I know that this all sounds crazy, and after that night, I'm probably not the most sane person anymore, but it's something that I hope none of you ever experience. After sensing all of this, I realized that I was out of water and I decided to go get some more before playing another round. As I was leaving my room though, I noticed the light was on in my dining room. Now, to give you a better understanding, my room is was now, I guess, on the 2nd floor. The 2nd-story hallway is basically a short bridge over the front door with a railing. From that hallway, you could see a room downstairs to the left, the front door, and to the right, the dining room. At my house, we have a strict rule about keeping the lights off during the night hours. We live deep in the woods with no blinds, so I guess maybe my parents didn't want light shining out into the deep darkness of the trees. I was always afraid of being seen from out there anyway, so the light was supposed to be off. As I was approaching the stairs, I heard a gross, wet noise coming from below. Now, my therapist says that I have PTSD, so from this point on, I apologize for any inaccuracies or confusing facts from this point on about this memory. Anyway, the noise lasted about a second, but I know that I heard it. I gripped my aluminum water bottle tight and slowly descended the stairs. On the way down, I heard another noise, a snap, like when you snap a twig. But it too sounded hard and rough. Too rough to have been a twig. It sounded like it was something much more dense. I got down to the floor and I crept towards the wide doorway of my dining room. What I saw is stuck in my head to this day. I'll never forget the agony, fear, anger, and sadness all at once. On the dining room table were plates, and on the plates were my sister, father, mother, and brother's heads. Blood was all over the floor, and their bodies were in a twisted mangle in the corner, all while a man in all black pulled the skin off of my 8-year-old brother's bones. He was smiling. I know that he was smiling. Through that pig mask, I could see the light reflecting off his eyes. They were bright, happy. I screamed something, a sound between animal and human, and I ran at him, part in fear, part in anger, and also in remorse. I positioned my water bottle like a tiny battering ram, and I rammed it hard into his chest. He took the blow and landed with me on his back. He giggled, pulled out a knife, and stuck it in my side like I was butter. I felt as I felt something like lightning striking my leg, and then I felt lightheaded. I brought my water bottle down over his head and I ran with the knife still sticking out of my side. I ran up the stairs. The bang from the water bottle must have woken up my baby sister because I heard a cry from her room up there. I didn't even realize that she was still alive. Gasping and shaking with pain, I ran to my room, grabbed my phone from the charger, and crashed through my sister's door, barely turning the knob first. I closed the door and I threw the dresser on its side against the door. Meanwhile, my sister was hysterical. I didn't know what to do. I fumbled with my phone's lock screen and I caressed my sister's head, whispering, "It's gonna be okay." But the truth is, I didn't think that it was going to be okay. I was losing blood, even with the knife still in, to reduce the flow a bit. I knew that all the wiggling from running had opened it up. I made a quick decision. I took the knife out. The blade was relatively small, maybe 3 inches, but the blood poured out like a current. I finally dialed 911 with shaky hands and applied a blanket to my wound. The operator picked up, and as soon as they did, I heard a giggle right behind the door. "Please, you gotta help me, I've been stabbed. A man killed my..." I choked back a sob. "A freak killed my family. Please help." The doorknob was wiggling vigorously now, and I saw a blade punch through the door as if it were made of cardboard. The operator said that they were sending the police, that they were on their way, and they would arrive in about 5 minutes. I hung up when another hole was punched through the door, about 2 inches away from the first. I bundled up my sister in as many blankets as I could and I fit a pillow around her. I was careful not to suffocate her. I made a small opening enough for her crying face to be visible. I was going to save her, no matter what it took. I opened the window and I threw her mattress on the ground outside. By now, a sizable hole had been torn in the door. I saw his eyes peering through. He snorted like a pig and then laughed. He reached his hand into the hole and unlocked the door. I didn't have any time to stop it now. The only thing between me and him was the dresser. I grabbed my baby sister, and as gently as I could, I dropped her out of the window. The impact was soft, thanks to the mattress and bundle. I knew that she would probably be safe until the police arrived, so I turned my attention to the door and I waited. My left arm was pinned to my side with the blanket on the wound. The other was holding a lamp. If I died, I would die fighting. I was never going to go down without a fight. The pig-masked man shoved the door and the dresser was flung to the side. At that moment, I heard the sirens and the familiar sound of gravel crunching outside. The killer pounced towards me and I swung the lamp. It impacted on his mask and broke into shards. He then pushed me. I think that he meant to push me out the open window, but I was so weak that I was already falling before he did, so I ended up hitting the windowsill and sliding down onto the floor. He approached me, the police car's lights reflecting off his eyes. Everything was going black, but I remember seeing the light fade from his eyes and a loud crack in the air. I felt his body hit mine and then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital, apparently lucky to be alive. My sister is safe and we will be taken care of by my grandmother. Apparently, the police officer, Deputy Yeager, saved my life and shot the killer when he saw him towering over me.
I've collected this story from a 17-year-old who was the victim of a local serial killer. I cannot disclose any of this information in order to keep his privacy. Sincerely, The Collector. Story number 1.